Thank you. And thank you, Linnea, for talking about the Death Valley. You have it in the US, but we also have it everywhere, and the way to actually go from one side to the other and work together. And this morning, that was the key topic of all the speakers, that they spoke about all the challenges we have ahead of us. We also talked about long-term commitments for creativity, creating a safe and sustainable Europe. And we talked about societal challenges, about the climate change, the Green Deal. The urgency came up several times. And I think that we certainly need to deliver on these opportunities, as Darja Isaksson pointed out. And materials for sustainable future, that is part of the discussion at this conference. The first panel, led by Heiner Linke, also talked a lot about speed. And that is really hard sometimes, as Linnea said. You talked about 10 years or 15 years. It takes a long time to travel across this Death Valley. And how do we actually accelerate this process? Tom Eriksson, he's working for Alfa Laval, and he talked about more open source collaboration. I think that's really inspiring what he said. And also Heike Riel from IBM, she spoke about focus on solving the problems, and then the technology come in later. And I think that is also what we do at Mistra. And I represent Mistra, which is a foundation, the Swedish Foundation for Strategic Environmental Research. We are quite small compared to Vinnova and Wallenberg, but we are really good at what we do. And I'm going to tell you a bit more about this. I think we were pioneers when we started out 30 years ago. Today we talk about missions a lot. We talk a lot about collaboration, which makes me really hopeful for the future. But Mistra, when we started our work in 1994, we are a state foundation, by the way. We try to bridge across the valley and combining high quality science with developing environments of knowledge production, and also solving problems and making a difference in the community and creating solutions. At the moment, we are trying to manage ourselves in this ecosystem or scientific landscape of different financiers. And the good thing with being a foundation is that we can be quite flexible, we can be agile, and we can complement the other financiers. And that's something I think is important in the research landscape. So we try to explore new ideas, new ways of working, and we also like to cooperate much more, because I think that's the only way forward, in fact. And we also focus a lot on impact in the society. And you talked about, Linnea, about the collaboration between science and companies. And I would highlight some unorthodox examples from some of our programs how we also address the general public and the community as a whole, because we also need acceptance for these innovative materials. So that's a key point. Just telling a little bit more about Mistra. Mistra, we have 5 themes that we have been focusing on the last 30 years, and that's climate change. We were quite early on addressing these problems and issues. We also work with circular economy, materials and production technology. We have a number of programs in that area, and also on food and bioeconomy. We are a country of forests, as you know. And also we are exploring cross-cutting challenges and opportunities in different ways. So we are quite flexible. And I think the role we have in the landscape is to be strategic, of course. That's part of the foundation's role. Creative, bold, I would say. Also be brave sometimes, and in some cases stubborn. Sometimes politicians are not brave enough, or they don't want to try or try new things or go ahead of politics. We can do so by being a free spirit in the room of the financial landscape. And we try to be ahead of the curve. I will also address some of the problems with also collaborating across. And one of these issues is time. It's really time consuming. I've been leading a number of programs over the years, and we are human beings. We build relationships, we build trust, and we communicate across disciplines, and that's not easy. So it takes time to build these relationships, and it takes time if you also collaborate with the industry, because there are different communication cultures, different aims of why we do things. So time is a critical factor. And also, I think innovation and creativity is not something you can order. You need to create a safe space for also making mistakes, because that's how we go forward. So it takes time, and I also think this communication across to, for example, the general public, you need to create a culture of communication. You have to think about the target audience when you communicate. And I think that's something that we in our programs really emphasize. So when we finance a program, that's normally 8 to 10 years of financing. We are problem-oriented, we are solution-oriented, we are focusing on co-creation, and we also include a budget for communication and dialogue. And that's what we expect from our programs. So it's interdisciplinary collaboration, it's also transdisciplinary collaboration. I bring 3 examples to you. One is Mistra Environmental Nanosafety, and they are here in the audience. They're also going to give a presentation later this afternoon. Mistra Steps, which is focusing on sustainable plastics and transition pathways. And finally, Mistra Bypass Path, which is a quite newly initiated program here at Lund University, which is focusing on the money, the financiers, the financial market, the ones that are financing companies, and that's also a group to target for transformation. So to start with Mistra Environmental Nanosafety, they've worked really close with industry and really close with policymakers all along, and they both do fundamental research, they produce knowledge that they communicate, and they also develop best practice. So they go all the way from defining the problem and also communicated the possible solutions. And they also focus on the impact in the environment. If you like to know more about the program, you also can visit their website. But I will give one example of an unorthodox way of communicating that this program has done. They have addressed children. I mean, it's really hard to understand what's the risk with nanoparticles. It's not easy. So they used theater as a way of communicating to a target audience, which you normally maybe not focus on, but that's the next generation of citizens. So this is a good example, and actually the person that is responsible is in the audience. You can speak to him a bit later if you want to be inspired by this. Go to Mistra Steps. They use art as a way of communicating. also a bit unorthodox, but plastics nowadays is connected to a lot of feelings, negative feelings. And plastic is not good in the wrong place, but plastic is also so useful as a material. So by providing art and also workshops and dialogues around that, they are communicating across to the general public. Another good example, I think. And also going to the last example, they're all led from Lund University, these programs. So Lund is really in the lead of this kind of research, I would say. And actually, I'm one behind, I realize now. You should have done like this, but you didn't know which presentations I have. Mistra Bypass Path, they just started, and it's really hard to communicate about biodiversity. It's quite complicated. I'm a biologist, so I know. And they started the program by introducing a crash course for the financial market on biodiversity and ecosystems on social media. So this is the first they've done, and now they go into fundamentals of the research. I think it's a great idea. But to end this, I would also say that I think it's really important to keep the eye on the future. And I think the planetary boundaries were mentioned in the first presentation today. And I really think that we need to be responsible in the innovation we do and pave the way for a safe and just future on this planet. By the way, the planetary boundaries, that was one of Mistra's first investments in research, Stockholm Resilience Center. Blue sky research, freedom for creativity, and they came up with the description of the planetary boundaries. And I think it's a really useful way of communicating across different competences. So, we all need to draw our straw to the stack. And I think let's start now. Start cooperate more and also speed it up. Thank you.